Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. And there was big controversy a couple of weeks ago as to who was the best individual player ever in a single title in Call of Duty history. One of the big names that was mentioned, maybe surprisingly so to some, was Ghost Crimsix, up there with Scump in Advanced Warfare, FormaL in Infinite Warfare, Simp from Black Ops 4 and other great names. Aix though came out and said that actually if Crim in Ghost is the best player ever, I must be the best player ever, because I was better than Crim at basically every single event that year. FormaL was then asked to give his thoughts on the matter, and he is siding with a surprising individual. Very much intriguing your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into today. Firstly, I always like to look at what's going on in the Respawn 8s because Drazah is on these every single night, and I just like to kind of keep tabs on who's grinding, who's looking to get involved, because, you know, we see that he's playing with JT, that's Decimate, Vivid, and TJ, and then was playing up against Lamar, so Lamar Accuracy, Gwyn, who is maybe linked to be going to a CDL team, Kremp, who I definitely think should be in the conversation as well after a pretty, you know, reasonably impressive stint on the Boston Breach. There's definitely potential in that player, and then Slasher, been doing a lot of grinding as well. This I also thought was cool from Octane, though. He's not been playing many Respawn 8s, he of course is now retired, but he was looking back recently on kind of his career, and he looked, well, he was asked the question, what's the best competitive COD that's ever been played? And yeah, his answer is the same as what my answer would be, which is Black Ops 3.
Next one from Phantoms. What was your favorite COD to play competitively? Hands down, Black Ops 3. That is the best competitive Call of Duty that we have ever played. I wish we had more events. I wish that Ban and Protect was a thing. I think that year was I mean, you had organizations coming that have never touched COD since. Unfortunately, you know, Cloud9, TSM, TL, etc., CLG. That was a year that competitive Call of Duty really took that next step. Plus, it was incredible maps. You had Fringe, you had Breach, you had all these things. Jetpacks were great. The gun meta was phenomenal. I think the only other answer here would be Black Ops 2, but jetpacks are lit. So.
Black Ops 3 was such a good game for many reasons. I do feel to some extent that it was somewhat wasted by having an unfortunately poor format, to be honest. Ban and Protect was a good idea, maybe on paper. I still think it could be viable and could even return at some point in some form or another. But I think it kind of, you know, ruined Arena or Ranked or whatever. It was a bit of a disaster. And I definitely think that the way it was executed wasn't great. The main reason why I say the format, though, is because there just wasn't that many events. I will say that that was the first game that I really got into heavily from, like, watching it from a competitive perspective and playing it as well, to be fair. I had watched a bit of COD before that. You know, I'd watched like Black Ops 2 Champs, I'd watched a bit of Ghost and a bit of Advanced Warfare maybe, but it was really Black Ops 3, the online pro league, which was just so good for coming home from school every day and just like chucking it on, seeing what was going on, just fantastic stuff. But there wasn't really that many events that year. That was the unfortunate part. There wasn't like there was 6-7 events. There was a few. There was one at the start of the year that was controversial, the South Carolina one. Then there was one like the Crown Melbourne Invitational when there was, you know, in Australia, but like only OpTic and Millennium and a few teams went. And then there was like a couple of events towards the end of the season, like Orlando and Anaheim and stuff like this. And then, of course, the World Championship. But it was somewhat unfortunate. I do wonder whether this upcoming game can get, you know, anywhere close to that type of level because, you know, just a very solid game plus an ideal format goes a very long way. And Dashy was even watching, or he looked back on one of kind of legendary competitive sniping montages from back in the day on, of course, Modern Warfare 2 on the very maps that we will be playing very shortly on Modern Warfare 3 in this year's game. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. Obviously a couple of weeks away now from release. It's been a long time, but hopefully this game is actually good and can live up to the expectations that it has on its shoulders at the moment. Let's talk then about this big controversy. So a couple of weeks ago there was lots of talk about who was effectively the best ever player in terms of most complete player, best ever performer, who was the best. And, you know, in COD history, there's been plenty of players thrown around in this conversation. As I mentioned at the start of the video, a few Advanced Warfare, Scump, Infinite Warfare, FormaL. Ghost Crimsix has always been in and around the conversation, but, you know, it was a question whether he was the greatest ever at that time or whether there's another player that deserves the accolade over Crim. Of course, it's all subjective to some degree, but I thought it was interesting that Prid was asking players about this. He talked to the OpTic guys about it, talked to Kenny about it, and also talked to, I think, Slasher about it, and even to Accuracy here on stream, and basically all of them said, yeah, Ghost's Crim was the man to beat. Like, there's never been a player that's harder to kill, never been a version of a player that's, you know, just more complete in terms of what they did to the map at all the time, which was, you know, definitely a controversial thing to say, especially because aBeZy went on to disagree. So we saw here that, you know, he then replied to this tweet that Chrome put out and said he maybe had one event that he was better than me. So aBeZy is pretty much saying that if Ghost Crim was the best version of a player ever, then aBeZy was better than that. So maybe aBeZy actually should be at the conversation for being the greatest individual player ever in terms of peak performance. Now, this is quite the take from aBeZy. Now, you can say what you want about it, but honestly, he was definitely underrated in that game. There's no doubt. As I said before, when we discussed this initially, I think that players like Crimsix, who were certainly not liked at the time, people, when he started to join OpTic, they then looked back on his career more fondly because he was on OpTic. You know, aBeZy never got that buff, shall we say. He was always the villain, so people would always look back on his previous success, let's say on Complexity and Evil Geniuses, not with the rose-tinted glasses they might have done for Crimsix. But even now, I think Crimsix kind of suffers from the same thing, where because, you know, he parted with OpTic not particularly amicably, then all of a sudden, people now looking back on Ghost Crim with not the same reverence as they might when he was on OpTic back in the day, and therefore it's, you know, the likes of Scump and FormaL that gets generally the preferential treatment. But the pros have maybe a different perspective here to the fans. So FormaL was asked this question and was basically saying, look, what do you think FormaL? Because FormaL came around into Ghost, he played Ghost, he was really good at Ghost actually, to such an extent that he was picked up straight away to the OpTic Dynasty, well, like what became the OpTic Dynasty going into the Advanced Warfare season, despite the fact that he only played COD for maybe 6 months or so. He won an incredibly impressive performance. Gfinity 3 it was on Envy at the end of Ghost when he had like a 1.35. So FormaL was really good. He didn't play the whole of Ghosts, but he was definitely aware of who the best players were and who were the most difficult players to play against. So FormaL got asked the question, is aBeZy right? Is aBeZy just delusional? What do you think?
FormaL, can you tell this COD debate? aBeZy says he was the best at Ghosts, but Crim says it was him. Who do you think was the best at Ghosts? I think Crim was better than aBeZy at Ghosts.
So FormaL didn't have to think about it for all that long before he came up with the answer of like, yeah, Crim was definitely the man to beat on this team and was the key reason why they were as good as they were. aBeZy was also really good on this game. There's no doubt about it. I'll just fast forward back here because, you know, just to watch this clip here from Crimsix. This is kind of like just peak Crimsix clip in this moment where, you know, Crimbot mode activated was straight up unkillable. And this is a thing for FormaL to say, mainly because it's not like him and Crim have, you know, at least in recent memory, the best relationship, right? If there was ever a possibility for FormaL to say, oh no, it was Paddy P and not Crim, because, you know, he knows that people will hear those words and think about it in the way that they might like to, that was potentially a good opportunity. Of course, Crim got spotted at the end of the clip, which is always kind of funny. These were the numbers that Real PD actually looked at and put together here from that Ghost season. Of course, it's not all about KD, but when you look at some of the numbers, you'll find that Crimsix generally had the better of aBeZy in the majority of these events. I still think it's kind of funny that aBeZy had a 1.35 at Ghosts Champs, and it's still not the highest KD of the event, because, you know, that was Crim, and actually, that was only number 2 as well. So maybe, I don't know, Karma had an even higher KD than this. But yeah, FormaL seems to be of the opinion that it's indeed Crimsix that should get the benefit of the doubt on this one, and yeah, I just find it kind of interesting because we know that Crim and FormaL had a lot of beef over the last couple of years. I think a lot of it has kind of been settled now in the same way that even around this time, kind of, like Crim and Scump were still beefing a bit. They kind of did squash it at some point, which was nice to see. I'm not really sure that Crim and FormaL have necessarily fully squashed the beef, but then again, you know, they were on the OpTic Dynasty podcast together, so, you know, it's nice to see that they've made up to some extent, and they did address actually this prize money stuff, didn't they, on that OpTic Dynasty podcast not long ago. But yeah, it was really 2021 when they were all going at it, when FormaL came out and said that he wished he dropped Crim from the Dynasty, and then Crim responded with this stuff, and it was, you know, all going off at the time. So, you know, if there was ever a time for FormaL to say, oh, you know, maybe aBeZy has got a point here, but yeah, he committed to his opinion. A couple of things to finish out the video with for you guys. This firstly from the Call of Duty League trivia. Which of these players had the most S&D bomb plants during the season? Whenever I look at these and I hear like, you know, most hill time or most bomb plants or most bomb detonation, whatever it might be, you've always got to look at the players that played the most series. This is the interesting, like, this is always the bias, right, that happens, is the players with the most of anything are typically the players that played more than anybody else did. All of these players will have played the regular online qualifiers and stuff like this, but Thieves did not make it very deep in tournaments. Neither did Mac. So how many search and destroys have they actually played? You know, okay, maybe in terms of bomb plants per search and destroy map, it's a different story. But when you're talking total bomb plants, it's almost always the teams that have made it deepest. I think Kismet was like hill time leader maybe, but you know, and a lot of that was because he just played a lot of hardpoint maps because they made it very deep in tournaments, especially towards the end of the season. So the options here were between these. I went for Simp here because of the reasons that I just said, that I thought, well, Simp did plant the bomb for those guys, did do a lot of the dirty work, and did play a lot of search and destroy this year. And actually, when I scrolled further down, I found that CDL Metrics had said that you can actually just look this stuff up, which is kind of funny. Like the CDL has it on their website, the stats, so you can actually find the answers to this. Kismet's quite a way down the list, actually. So fair play to Mac, who was almost had more plants than Simp, but it's actually not. So Simp has 121, Mac had 112, then Thieves, then Kismet. That's your top 4. But yeah, it's a fair play, as I say. Like, Mac probably in terms of plants per round had the most, but you know, he didn't make it deep enough in tournaments to justify the #1 spot. And just one final thing, I know that like esports awards type stuff, the voting is now open. They always do this around about the same time of the year. So yeah, 30th of November, that's when this year's esports awards are. And we know that Scump, of course, up for Content Creator of the Year. Zuma, I believe, was recently added to it. So yeah, if you guys want to get involved and vote, feel free to do so. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
Baseball that much, though. All right, and go.
Buccaneers, Jaguars, Jets, Chargers, Broncos, Patriots, Colts, Dolphins, Browns, Cowboys, 49ers, Seahawks, Panthers, Steelers, Chiefs, Texans, Ravens, Titans, Washington Commanders, LA Rams, Saints, Bills, Bengals, Vikings, New York Giants, Packers, Lions, the Bears, the Raiders, the Falcons, the Eagles, and the fucking Cardinals.
Damn!